Hey there, Dave here, taking a look at puzzle from a Wednesday Tute, and I believe this is the 12 o'clock Wednesday Tute puzzle. So let's dive in and see what we've got. It looks like we've got here a new proof system, one that we haven't seen before, at least that I haven't seen before. So let's see what we're working with. So we've got a language with infinitely many atomic sentences. Okay, and I'm just going to use lowercase letters, P, Q, R, S, etc. for those. Looks like that's what's going on here. We've got 3 unary connectives. Looks like a 1-dot connective, a 2-dot connective, and a 3-dot connective. And judging by what I can see below, it looks like those are written similarly to how negation is written, right before the sentence that they apply to. So that works out well. And 1 binary connective, which looks like it's this sort of heart pretzel kind of thing going on. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got here. First thing I'm going to do is just copy these rules over onto my own scratch pad on the side so we can all take a look at these and we can see what sort of system we're dealing with. So, first rule we're looking at is an introduction rule for the single dot. There we go, right? So dot intro says, okay, if we have a sentence, then we can conclude dot that sentence from it. And then we have very similar rules for the 2-dot connective and for the 3-dot connective. And then the elimination rules for these connectives are also very similar. Basically, they're just the reverse of the introduction rules, from what I can see. So I'll just put these down here to make sure we've got all these. And then from the 3-dot to 5, so that's our 3-dot elimination. So that starting bunch of rules seems relatively straightforward. Note that all these rules are harmonious. If we had a detour, right, if we introduced one of these connectives and then immediately eliminated it, we could just skip over the connective entirely. So that's a nice thing to see. So we've got these rules, but now there's some extra rules as well that start to mix together some of these different connectives. So these will be worth thinking about in some more detail. So first we have this kind of general rule, right, that says we're using this asterisk to stand in for any particular unary connective of the language, right? So if we have 2 sentences that have the same unary connective as their main connective, then we can get those 2 sentences kind of pretzel joined. I'm going to call that connective the pretzel, the binary connective. So, okay, so if we have 2 sentences that both have the same main connective, and that main connective is unary, then from that we can conclude the pretzeling of those 2 sentences. Now, we have some more rules to take a look at. The next 3 look similar to each other in some ways, but different in others. So let's take a look at this set of next 3 rules that we've got. Or actually, let me name this rule that we just did now. I'll call that, oh, my pretzel is terrible. I'm going to call that a kind of pretzel introduction rule. You know, just to have a name for the rule. Okay, so now the next rules we're looking at are looking at rules where we've got different unary connectives, but that are involved in a pretzel sentence. So if we have single dot phi pretzel double dot, now that looks to me like it's also a phi. Then from that we're allowed to conclude psi, absolutely anything at all. So this is basically saying that single dot phi, pretzel, double dot phi it's explosive. It's like Folsom, right? It's this thing that's so bad that anything else would follow from it. And if you look all the way to the right, you'll see that we get a similar sort of triple dot phi, pretzel, single dot phi is also going to be explosive. And that rule in the middle there, interestingly, is slightly different. That rule in the middle there says, okay, double dot phi, now not pretzel triple dot phi, but pretzel triple dot psi, gives us just psi itself. So here this conclusion is not arbitrary. This conclusion is importantly related to the premise. So I'm not really sure what to make of these three rules yet, but just noting them and thinking about this here. And then it looks like we've got one more sort of rule expressed down at the bottom. And this I struggle to know what to think of because it doesn't have the kind of shape that all our other rules have had. So all the rules that we have in all the proof systems we've looked at and all the other rules in this proof system have a single formula below the line, the conclusion of the rule, and that tells us how they fit together into these proof trees. But what we have written here seems to have two different formulas below the line, right? So it's again generalizing over connectives. And the way this is used makes me think, yep, so we're again looking now at a pretzeling of two sentences, both of which have the same main connective, and that connective is unary. I know it doesn't explicitly say unary this time, but given the way it comes together there, I think it's got to be unary. And like I said, I'm not entirely clear how to interpret this rule because it has two different sentences below the line. So here's how I'll interpret it, just to have something concrete to work with. I'm going to suppose that basically we've got this rule in two different versions, right? That we can conclude from that sentence phi, or we could also conclude from that sentence psi. All right, so I'll split that rule into two rules like this, and I'll think of these as kind of pretzel elimination rules, right? I'll call it pretzel elim 1 and pretzel elim 2. If that's not what's intended, I'm sorry, but that's my stab at what's intended there, so I'll go with it. Okay, so we have this proof system here, right? We've got harmonious intro and elimination rules for our unary connectives, and relatively straightforward rules at that. Then we've got this interesting pretzel introduction rule that depends on our unary connectives, but depends on actually having the same ones. We've got our pretzel elimination rules down at the bottom that also depend on kind of matching between unary connectives. And then we have this very interesting trio of rules in the middle that, like I say, I'm really not sure what to make of yet, but among these, there is, one of them is a standout, right? This one is unlike the others. Okay. Anyway, so there's our proof system. And now let's see, what are we meant to do? So here we go. In this proof system, the first task we have is to prove a particular argument. And the argument is dot P dot Q or triple dot S with the conclusion Q. Okay, and I'm going to assume that what it takes in this proof system to give a proof of an argument is the same kind of thing that it takes in a proof system like NJ or NM or NK to give a proof of an argument. That is, I'm going to assume that what I need to prove here is, or what I need to give as a proof, is a proof that has the conclusion Q, and where all of the open assumptions of the proof are contained in that list of premises, right, somewhere in those four. And so an example proof that would do that would be that. Let me just make sure, did I remember how the double dot elimination rule works? Yes, it looks like I did. Right, you can see up here, double dot elimination will enable us to, when we have a double dot sentence, we can remove that and just get its component below the line. And indeed, that's just what I've done here. So there is my proof of this argument. And let's check to make sure it really is a proof of this argument. So what do we need? Well, we need its conclusion to be Q, and indeed its conclusion is Q. And we need all its open assumptions to occur in here. And it has one open assumption, dot dot Q, which does indeed occur up in here. So there's an answer to the first question. Right, that is a proof that is a proof of that argument. And so we can move on to the second question. What is this logic representing? And I mean, the quick answer here, right, is, oh, I don't know. Right? I don't have any way to look into your minds and figure out what it was representing, but I'll think through some possibilities anyway, just to try to see what I can detect, see what I can figure out of what you've got here. So the first thing I notice, anyway, is this is a very interesting set of rules at the top, right? In effect, these rules are kind of telling us that the dot connectives, the single dot connective and the double dot connective and the triple dot connective, are all sort of inferentially idle. As far as what we can infer from them, it's the very same things we could infer from the sentence itself that they apply to. And whenever we can infer the sentence that they apply to, we can infer them too. So what these rules are kind of saying to me is, at least as main connectives, these dot connectives sort of may as well not be there, right? They're kind of transparent, so to speak, at least as they serve as main connectives. What's interesting then is how those rules relate to this sort of second batch of rules that ties them into the pretzel connective, because this second batch of rules is telling us that, okay, when the pretzel connective is a main connective, those dot connectives actually really matter a great deal, right? So as main connectives, they don't matter at all, but when the pretzel connective is a main connective, the dot connectives really, really differ from each other. So one thing I'm going to go ahead and notice, just thinking about what can we prove in this system. So here is a question that I'm going to ask myself and then try to answer. Let's think about a sentence like, I don't know, dot P, pretzel, dot dot Q. And all I really care about here is I've got some sentence that has as its main connective the pretzel, and its components have different numbers of dots on. Right? And now what I want to know is there any proof with this sentence as a conclusion? And the answer is yes, there definitely are, right? So I'm supposing that the rule of assumption continues to work just the way it has in all the other proof systems we've studied. So here would be one such proof, right? Just the sentence itself, just assume it. That's a proof with that conclusion. Here's another proof with that as its conclusion. That's not just an assumption, right? It's a double dot elimination. It has a more complex assumption, and so on and so forth. Okay, so is there any proof with this conclusion? Yes, and there are, in fact, lots, because we can always use those dot rules up at the top to generate lots more proofs once we have one. What led me to ask that question, and what I was focusing on, was looking at these rules. It doesn't look like we have a way of introducing... Yeah, okay. So let me make up some jargon, and then because that's sometimes handy. So let's think just about pretzel sentences. And by that, I mean sentences that have the pretzel as their main connective. So a pretzel sentence is going to look like, phi pretzel psi. And we'll call it balanced means phi and psi have the same unary main connective. Yeah, let me just do that. I'm going to say unbalanced otherwise. So our pretzel sentences, I want to say, come in two types. We've got balanced pretzel sentences and unbalanced pretzel sentences. So to be balanced is both the components of the pretzel sentence have a unary main connective, and in fact they have the very same unary main connective. Okay, now looking at our rules, you can see that pretzel intro rule will only ever allow us to prove balanced pretzel sentences. Right, we could never get a proof of an unbalanced pretzel sentence from that pretzel intro rule. That seems right. So what's the generalization I'm looking for here? There definitely are proofs with unbalanced pretzel conclusions, as we've seen. We've seen some examples here. But there's something like that that I want to articulate. So here's a guess. Guess. Any proof with an unbalanced pretzel conclusion has not just an, but I'll say has that same unbalanced pretzel sentence as a sub-sentence of an open assumption. And in this system, there are no discharging rules, so open assumption is just the same as an assumption. Now, why have I guessed that? Well, basically, I don't see any other way to get an unbalanced pretzel sentence to occur in a proof. Right? You can always get it in through an assumption because you can get anything in through assumptions. You can just assume whatever. But we don't have a way to build up an unbalanced pretzel sentence anywhere in the course of a proof. The only way we have of building a pretzel sentence at all is that pretzel intro rule, which can only produce balanced ones. So I'm gonna stick with it as a guess. I'd want to sit and ponder it for longer before I said this is something I know for sure, because I could be missing something, but I'm pretty confident about it. I'll call that a confident guess. So that at least gives me some information about what's going on here. Right, unbalanced pretzel sentences are very, very difficult to prove. Basically, you have to take them for granted if you're going to get to them. And that kind of lines up with some of these middle rules that make certain unbalanced pretzel sentences explosive, but only very specific. Yeah, I don't know what to make of those middle rules, I gotta say. When it comes to what is this logic representing, anyway, I'm afraid I may just have to throw up my hands on this one, not because there's anything wrong with it as a logic, I think, or anything wrong with it as a proof system. I think it works quite well. I think it's an interesting one. But, I mean, you are, in effect, asking me to guess what's in your head, and I have no way of doing that. So, yeah, I do not know what this logic is representing. I take it from that question that y'all who made this have something particular in mind, and I hope someone will let me know. I'm actually quite curious, and I look forward to finding out what what you had in mind as you were building up this system. I mean, it's something to do. There's something going on with these balanced versus unbalanced things. At least that's where I want to focus my attention. But yeah, like I said, I'll be very curious to find out what y'all had in mind as you made this. Thank you very much for a cool proof system and a cool puzzle. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you when I do. Bye-bye.